welcome back. And this week we're going to be talking about something that everybody's familiar with, but unfortunately it seems kids more and more these days, and that is stress. Hello, and welcome to Sounds Healthy, a podcast of University Health System. I'm your host, Elizabeth Allen. Hey, we're back with Dr. Rob Sanders. He's the medical director of Pediatric Urgent Care in downtown San Antonio. Dr. Sanders, it's great to have you back.
Awesome to be here, as always. Thanks for having me.
Sure. And today we're going to be talking about something that you see even in urgent care.
Oh, my gosh.
And that is stress.
All the time. Like, all the time.
Well, first of all, let's just say that it's stressful to be a human.
No doubt.
And so even though we think of kids as being carefree, it's automatically stressful because they're alive and growing up.
You know, and as adults, we kind of think about like, kids are kids. Like, what kind of stress would they have? Like,
no mortgage, no
right.
insurance.
They don't have to go to work.
Blah, blah, blah.
We feed them most of the time, right?
But
yes.
But we know they do get stressed.
Oh, yeah.
But is it true, is it true that you're seeing more of it?
We are, definitely. And what we're seeing, honestly, is more in every age group, right? So everything from those preschool age kids all the way up through, our high school age and older kids, for sure. It's different stress than what you might think of, but it's definitely there.
Well, what kind of issues do you see coming into urgent care that are stress-related?
Mostly related to behavioral stuff, right? So, in younger kids, lashing out, behavioral problems at home, attention issues, depression, and even worse, psychiatric illnesses with younger and younger kids now. In all honesty, I think the youngest child that I've seen having a true legitimate psychiatric breakdown in my own personal practice is the age of 8. Oh. And when I finished my training many years ago, I just had I'd never even heard of anything like that. So we're seeing it a lot more. The impacts of a lot of the things that we do as human beings now is a lot different than it used to be. And I really feel like that we're dealing with stress in a lot different ways now.
So how is it different in different age groups?
So you can for the purpose of what we'll talk about today, I think it's probably best if we talk about it in the different school age groups maybe. Mm-hmm. So in regards to elementary kids versus the junior high kids and the high school kids, right? So elementary school age kids, the types of stresses they're going to see are related to a lot of stuff in home. Okay, the in-home environment is really something that we need to be thinking about. Do they have a safe and welcoming place to live? Right? Do they get fed every day? And I was kind of joking about that, but in reality, it's something that is truly and truly out there. Is that sometimes kids are not getting fed at home because families might not be able to afford it. And then the other side of it is, are we feeding our kids nutritious foods? So not just a soda pop and a bag of Funyuns. Absolutely. Right. In thinking about making sure that our kids are eating well, right? It's so easy just to kind of head out to one of our local or your local fast food chain for dinner and grab a quick bite, right? And because I'm tired at the end of the day. I don't know about you. No doubt. Absolutely. And sometimes thinking about wanting to cook at the end of a long, busy day after you've worked all day can be definitely pretty daunting. Not so fun. But eating out multiple times per week is not really and truly healthy for you. And it has everything to do with the types of foods that we're eating, right? So the ideal plate, okay, and then this kind of plays out for everybody. Everybody should be eating the ideal plate, and the ideal plate now is different than it used to be. So it is really and truly half of your plate should be a vegetable, okay, and that can be salad, green beans, broccoli, whatever, squash, you name it. So a half of your plate is a vegetable, a quarter of your plate is one of these lean proteins, hopefully, and then the other quarter of your plate can be like a starch.
Okay. All right. But even if we can't get to the ideal,
Yeah.
we can just kind of try to move in that direction.
Absolutely. Little step by step, okay? And it doesn't have to be like a gourmet meal, right? There's definitely lots of options out there at the local supermarkets that you can get to cook something pretty quick.
Excellent. Excellent. So that really, a healthy diet applies to all ages in terms of helping you manage stress.
Absolutely.
What about middle school? That's a whole different kettle of fish.
No doubt, no doubt. So that's a challenging age, right? So in elementary school, it's a lot about kind of learning the basics, right? In most elementary schools, I would say it's a pretty warm, welcoming environment. The amount of work is reasonable, but not really overwhelming. Developmentally, as a human being too, you're still kind of living, you're still at home, you still want to be with your parents, you still need that really warm, nurturing environment in your home to succeed. Junior high we're talking the ages of 11 to 14 essentially, right? So we're thinking like, oh my gosh, right, huge changes. And it goes from everything from your physically, your body changes so much between when you're 11 and 14. And that's all that puberty stuff that you would think about. The chemicals in your brain are changing. The way that 11-year-old looks at the world and a 14-year-old looks at the world are almost completely different. So you go from, again, you just left elementary school, you're 11 years old, you finished 5th grade, you are still very focused on being with your family and your parents, and you have lots of friends and you do activities possibly. And then as you age through junior high at the age of 14, you're starting to see kids wanting to be more independent. So the way that they're looking at the world and the decisions they're making at the age of 14 are way different than when they're at the age of 11 when they just start junior high.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's way different, right?
Yeah. The memories are horrifying, actually.
Yeah. Having a child who's currently going through this, it's even, as a pediatrician, I guess I'd even say I'm more acutely aware of kind of these changes. And I'm looking at myself all the time as like, am I telling her the right thing? Am I doing the right thing here? And yeah, as a parent, even it's a huge time of growth because every phase, presents its challenges. But for me personally, this phase has been probably the hardest one because of this pulling away that we're seeing. The physical changes and the hormone changes and all that stuff kind of comes with the territory. But when you see your kid starting to turn into a small adult and start to want to spend time away from the house and start to be influenced by a lot of things outside of the house, you realize really quick it's a big world, it's scary, and I think that it's important for me as a parent pulling back at that point, really think about leaning in.
Leaning in terms of they need to start defining themselves as adults.
I agree with that.
But
I agree with
they
that.
need help.
This is at that age though. That's that transition, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you hit it right on the head. They need help, right? They really do. So they're going to look at how you make decisions, look at the way that you deal with situations, right? And they're going to probably model a lot of that stuff. You're modeling a lot of that stuff for them, right?
Right. Like whether they like it or not, they're going to be like you. Just like you don't really want to end up like your parents in certain ways, but then you hear yourself.
And you look at yourself and your child a lot, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
So and leaning in means versus, they're going to keep pulling away from you. And if our natural instinct sometimes maybe, well, if they don't want to be with me, then I don't want to be with them. But they're not ready yet. They're just not emotionally ready to be dealing with a lot of those things that are out there that can potentially harm them.
Completely on their own.
Completely on their own. So that's where we need to be leaning in. So ask questions about how your kid's day went. Ask them, hey, what are you guys talking about on Twitter today? Or what are the other ones that kids like to use these days?
Well, excuse me, but I have a 16-year-old son, and every time I ask him about his day, that is a guaranteed shutdown.
It's a huge shutdown, and that's a very good point, okay? But I think if you keep asking is the important thing. And they're not gonna sit there and talk to you about how everything went and how school is and their friend groups and what they're talking about on Snapchat. but they need to know you're still engaged.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think that you ask the questions, but even more importantly, you listen to the answers, whether they're verbal or not.
Actually, super good point. Exactly. So looking at those nonverbal cues is really important. And that's a huge part of communication, right? So looking at kind of how they respond when you ask that question, right, is super important. And leaning into the point where you're not being like obtrusive or obstructive or kind of like or being so much that you're kind of smothering your child.
Or, and this is a hard one,
What?
Judging.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Because I think we have to remember that the way we grew up was way different than the way these kids are growing up. My daughter or my kids and all kids at this age are being influenced a lot by social media and electronics. For me, the summers in between like my junior high years, like I had a small friend group I hung out with and we did activities or whatever and baseball and played and went to the pool and I saw a couple other friends occasionally. But kids now, they're constantly connected. So the school year might end and all those face-to-face sort of, relationships go away, but they're still talking every single day and they're still communicating and they're still doing all these things online. And I think that's where I think that's another area where in truth, I think we need to consider as a parent leaning in still a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
You don't need to sit there and constantly be looking at every single post that is made, but we need to we need to know what they're doing.
But you might check their search history every now and then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No doubt. And having I think it's important to have a discussion, right? Keep talking about, social media with your kids and keep talking about phone use and looking at what they're doing online, even in urgent care, right? I constantly see the effects of this with kids, but everything really truthfully from these little preschool kids who are just totally dialed in on their phone now to high school kids who are being bullied, through Snapchat and Facebook and all these other online apps.
Oh boy. Well, that leads us to high school kids and all the new stresses that go along with that.
Right.
What kinds of things do you see besides that, of course?
Yeah, right. So you transition now from kind of this, from this kind of sheltered, I would say, kind of, elementary school age kid through junior high, and now you're starting to kind of exert your independence a little bit. And through high school, you're going to continue to become more and more independent. So you've developed some of these closer friend groups in junior high, both in the activities and classes and outside sort of activities that you do. And then you go into high school where it's a bigger fishbowl, I guess you would say. More people, more potential friend groups, different activities. And you're exposed to different things, and your body is maybe not changing as rapidly, and the hormones aren't changing as rapidly at that point, but you're starting to explore different things now that maybe you might not have had the exposure to before.
And maybe you feel like an adult.
You feel exactly. So as you get older, you start to feel more like an adult, and you might start to want to do more adult-like things like drinking alcohol. Maybe doing drugs, maybe having sex.
Uh-oh.
Okay, yeah, yes, exactly.
That's stressful.
It's super stressful. I think stressful for a parent as well, right?
That's what I was saying.
Yeah, no doubt. And again, it's having like these, continuing to try to have conversations with your kid. I think what I've seen, the most well-adjusted kids that I've seen through the last, through my career, I would say, both in the ER and the urgent care, are kids that have really good relationships with their parents and that they can talk and they feel comfortable talking with their parents about a lot of things. It's not to say that every kid who's got a great relationship with their parent is not going to potentially, be less likely to be depressed or anxious or have trouble coping with, the stresses of school and your friends and stuff like that. But having an outlet is so important.
Right. So they're still facing these risks, and everybody's different, but they have a support network that helps them a little bit more through the rough spots.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that we always encourage kids to do when we talk to them is have that network. And it doesn't have to be a parent, right? It can be a close friend. It can be an extended family member. It can be somebody maybe from the place where you worship, your church or synagogue, or somewhere where you have a trusted adult who can help you or help your child through that time.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Because parents can also be a source of stress.
No doubt. Exactly. And you're 100% right. There can be a lot of things going on between parents or between parents and kids and other kids in the home. We have to think about a million different things when families come into the office and when we're talking to them about stress and talking about depression maybe or anxiety with kids. It's not just your chemical makeup. It's everything around you. And sometimes we forget that with a high school age kid, that the way that things are in the household have a huge impact on the way a kid feels.
Well, let me ask you something, Dr. Sanders, about as a pediatrician, a parent brings a child into your office with what you consider to be possibly a stress-related issue. What do you observe? How do you read the parent-child relationship? And how do you see whether the parent might be contributing to that? And then, of course, how do you deal with that?
That's a good question. And in my line of work, we kind of have a basic idea of what's going on before we walk in the room. It'll say something along the lines of, depression, anxiety, sadness, behavior, school problems. And sometimes, though, and this is a little bit of an aside, sometimes it'll be abdominal pain. Sometimes it'll be headache. Okay. So it's important for us as doctors to dig a little bit, right? Sometimes when we get in there to see if there's something else going on, right? So in thinking about all that, when you walk in the room, you immediately kind of get a sense of kind of what's going on, right? Is there some serious stress? The mom, let's say, is in the corner with her arms crossed, staring at the kid on the table who's got his head hanged low, or maybe the kid's snarling at the parent. Is the parent in the corner typing on and texting on their phone, and the kid is doing the same, right? Or is the kid sitting on the table crying? Okay, these are all like kind of these cues that we take as doctors when we walk in the room to get this basic dynamic of what's going on, right? So taking it a step further, having that discussion with a family as a doctor in the ER or the urgent care can be really tough. And I'll tell you that much because it's, and honestly, most of these discussions I'm going to have with usually either, late junior high age kids, but mostly high school age kids. I need to go in and really be, kind of that neutral party, right? Get the basic information, understand what's going on. I need to establish a relationship with both the parent and the child separately. And that is super important because, I'm here for the kid, not for the parent, right? Of course, I'm here for the family dynamic, and I want to make sure that this kid, that ultimately this child is safe and the home is a good place for the kid, and that includes the parents. But that child is my patient. That kid, that teenager sitting on the table or in the chair who's having a rough day or a rough patch is my patient that day. So I have to be able to have a good relationship with them. And you take judgment off the table. You listen to what's going on that day, and you listen to what the parents' concerns are. I think another important thing as a pediatrician is that we have a few minutes of time with the parent outside the room. So I'll bring a nurse in or another employee that works with us, or a clinician, and have a private discussion with that kid. As a teenager, it's important to be able to, again, we talked about this a little bit before, but advocate for yourself, right? So that gives them that time to kind of give me their side of the story, to advocate for their position and what they're concerned about and why they feel the way they do, and then as a doctor to kind of bring it all together. I think it's something that what I've seen over the years is that a lot of times when kids come in with these things, these kind of points where they get really sad or depressed, I feel like a lot of times the kids that are most well equipped to take care of those things are the parents that have the best relationship with their kids. Okay, and I don't mean like your best friends. I mean that you are a safe place for your kid, And I think that's really important when you have older high school age kids or older teenagers, right? You don't have to. You don't have to be there all the time. You're not going to be there all the time. But what I hope is that over the period of time leading up to that point, that we've modeled good things and good decisions for our kids, right? But we've also developed that safe place to live with our kids.
And the child is your patient, obviously,
Yeah.
and you only have a small window to work with. You can't do everything, but you probably recognize that sometimes parents, they love their kids so much, but they're at their wits' end, and you just see all that frustration, and I can't do anything with this kid.
Yep. So as a doctor, that needs to come out. And I think, and it's crucial, I think that I can, at least in my setting as either the primary care doctor or the ER urgent care doctor, is we need to start the discussion. Because a lot of times what I find is that when a parent has that type of frustration, the kid is not hearing maybe what that frustration is at home. And I'm not talking about like them not having arguments, because they are, but a parent, when they come and see me, is going to talk to me and tell me what their concern is. And then at the same time, I'm going to ask the kid to do the same exact thing and talk to me, tell me what their concern is. Because a lot of times there's a huge amount of miscommunication that goes on when there's angst between the parents and the kids. So getting a lot of that out in the open, right? In the kind of the context of that really short period of time, gets the discussion going. Lets me gauge kind of where both the kids at, where the parents at, and helps us develop like a game plan for moving forward.
That sounds fabulous. What are some of the things that are major stressors for high school kids that they come in to see you for?
So first things first, I think this can kind of play out to adults too, is that we are not perfect. Your parents are not perfect.
What?
Your friends are not perfect. I know, right? You gotta develop this sense of perfection of yourself and others around you. And I think we need to first remember that none of us are perfect. So we need to kind of relax a little bit in that regard. I know it sounds way too easy, but it's a really difficult thing. But first and foremost, that. The second thing is, a lot of times as teenagers, we get wrapped up in a lot of negativity. Turning that around and kind of exuding like a positive energy. And I know it sounds kind of crazy, but looking at things as with a brighter smile versus a frown, I think, is really important, and having a positive outlook versus a negative outlook. I think as a parent, I think when you're having discussions with your teenager and they're kind of constantly like kind of in this negative cycle, as cheesier or as goofy as it might feel like, try to figure out a way to frame the discussion differently. I did terrible at volleyball today. This would be a discussion that I have with my daughter. I did terrible at volleyball today. I couldn't serve it over the net. I'm like, yeah, but you served it over, but you served it over the net like, 3 more times today than you have in the past. Great job. I can't tell you how good you are doing compared to where you were like even a few months ago, right? So kids and even I'd say adults, we get into the cycle of negativity, trying to help turn that around. Okay.
Well, that's hard when you're looking at their grades.
Yeah, no doubt, right?
Or yet another missing paper.
Yeah, exactly. And then at the same time, as a parent, and I this is the funny thing, is I have this discussion both with high school and toddler parents. We need to set boundaries for our kids. So it's not okay in your household for your kid to have a late paper or to have missing work, right? They need to understand that. And there has to be ultimately some sort of consequence, whatever it is that you all decide for that, and with a toddler, a kid who's having a tantrum in the middle of the grocery store or who might have, drawn on the wall with markers. Okay. That's not okay. Right. So that's a boundary. We hit it. Okay. We can't respond to that with being like, oh, ha, it's okay. Go ahead and keep doing that. We have to set a boundary, and we have to recognize that if they continue to cross that boundary, there's going to be a consequence. Same thing for teenagers. It sounds really weird, right? Kind of coming full circle like that, but it's ultimately one of these things that, will live through, your whole parenting career, I would say, is making sure you have appropriate boundaries, and that once your children cross them, once or twice or even 3 times, that you are going to there's going to be a consequence for that. right? Whatever it is that you decide it to be. So in regards to missing schoolwork, in regards to underperformance and whatnot, it's A, having the boundaries, but B, making sure that you are available as a parent to help them and being engaged with the school or the teacher. Or I think what even might be better would be, figuring out a way to get your kid to be engaged with the school or the teacher, right? And making sure they're accountable for that.
Does that help with the grade pressure? Because there seems to be a lot of grade pressure.
And that kind of goes back to that perfection thing, right? You don't have to get, straight A's if you're not super, smart in a certain subject. The goal isn't to get an A. The goal is to master the subject material, I would say personally. But at the same time, you want your kid to go to college, maybe. You want your kid to succeed, and an A is better than a B. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of grade stress for sure.
So, part of that is this doesn't make it go away, but accepting that it's real.
Right. True. Right. Exactly. Accepting that where you're at is real is really important, but figuring out a way that you can continue to help your kid out and kind of make a plan to succeed for the future. Right.
Yeah. So we've got to deal with grades. We've got to deal with social media that we've talked about, and we'll talk about some more.
So crucial. I think another thing that I really want to bring up real quick is is body image. Okay, and this is not just a girl thing. Okay, this affects men and women equally. And being okay with how you look. Okay, whether or not whatever weight you might be. Okay, whatever ethnic background you might be from. Okay, you are great the way you are, and I think it's important for us to remember that as we transition into adulthood, there's still a lot of questions about how we are going to end up, right, and what we're going to be as an adult, right, and having body image issues during high school is totally normal, okay, but it's important that instead of internalizing those things and finding ways and trying to deal with those things on your own as a teenager, to talk with somebody about that, whether it be your parent or someone that you trust, will help out so much.
The commencement speech that got repeated, and I can't remember who wrote it, but one of the bits of advice was, don't read beauty magazines. They will only make you feel ugly.
Right? No
doubt.
There are
just so many signals about how you're supposed to be that point to a very narrow spectrum of beauty.
So true.
Or attractiveness.
And think about, and on top of that, right, you have a very vulnerable age group, okay, who are looking at these things and really defining themselves based on these pictures that they see in the media, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then on top of that, they get the stress and pressure from other people, okay, and other kids, both at school and online. And a lot of that's all mixed up, okay, where, your friends might, not talk to you at school, but they'll talk to you online. And then people at school who you might not even know and you might not even interact with on a daily basis, they might be interacting with you online positively, very possibly negatively as well. And not getting too much into the social media and online, but it's changed, the way that kids interact and the way that we interact with each other. It's really easy to hide behind the words you put online, right? And when you write things there that can hurt somebody else, it doesn't feel the same as looking at them in the face and saying those things.
Yeah.
Right?
Face-to-face human interaction.
But what I will say, though, is those words, regardless of if they come out of your mouth or they're typed in a public place online, okay, the impact is the same. And that's the scary thing, is that you can type something really ugly online and then turn your phone off and it's fine. But whoever you aim that ugly statement at reads that and looks at the fact that hundreds of the people in their class or school saw that terrible statement, and the impact is the same.
Yeah, that's pretty disheartening. That's
scary.
That really frightens you for your kids, for anybody who has to deal with that.
Absolutely, yeah.
So the problems may be shifting a little bit. The solutions are still pretty universal, it seems like, though. Sleep, diet.
Yeah.
having a safe place.
Yeah.
Having a safe place where you feel loved.
Yeah, no kidding. Exactly. And having the people you can talk to. In regards to sleep, we say 8 to 10 hours a night, okay? A place where a thing that I talk about with teenagers and their parents when they come in, we talk about stress and school performance and whatnot is again getting back to their phone, because it's the center of almost everything a kid is all about nowadays, right? In regards to sleep, that phone really should not be in your kid's room. Okay,
Yeah.
Think about having a discussion with your kid about what bedtime is going to look like. Okay, it's going to be at a certain time every night during school. We want 8 to 10 hours of sleep a night, uninterrupted by your phone.
Maybe first you put your phone to bed.
There you go. Right. So have a common place where you might do that outside of your kid's room. Right. Let's make sure there's no. I would honestly say let's keep tablets out of the room. Let's keep phones out of the room. Let's try to keep TVs out of the rooms as well.
Yeah.
Uninterrupted sleep is super important. And this summer we were kind of going through some challenges like that with my daughter, where we recognized that she started to spend more and more time on her phone late at night. We were looking again at her kind of online sort of usage, right? Mm-hmm. And seeing she was getting messages at 3 and 4 in the morning. Okay. I talk about this all the time, right? But this was the first time I ever really experienced it in my own home. And it's not an easy discussion, but it's so important. And your kid needs to be disconnected from the internet for a lot of reasons, but ultimately they need good rest to perform well during the day.
Something that helps rest and also helps stress more directly is exercise.
Absolutely.
Movement.
Yeah, something, right? It doesn't have to be an organized team. You don't have to be on the volleyball team at school or at the Y. It can be anything. And generally, what we'd like to see is at least 30 minutes a day if possible. And at the very minimum, at least a few days a week of getting out there and doing 30 minutes of something. Whether it be walking around the park, okay, with your friend, your parent, okay, or your pet, right? Playing basketball with your friends, okay? Just doing anything really, and up and off the couch. I think that's the key, right? Mm-hmm. The more the better. Exercise has so many benefits, okay?
Oh, yeah. Taking out the trash.
Yeah.
Doing yard work.
I like that. That's a great idea.
Changing the oil in Mom's car.
Oh, okay. Well.
Wait. I'm just getting going.
Yeah. So there are some things that, might be a little more dangerous that I might say let's hold off to until they're like a little more technically proficient. But getting under a heavy car would make me nervous. But does your son actually change your oil?
No.
That would be pretty awesome.
But I'm getting inspired with the list.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, anything to get a kid off the couch would be ideal.
Fabulous. Well, Dr. Sanders, I've enjoyed this very much, and it's really been a lot of good information and good perspective. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me. It's always great to talk.
You've been listening to Sounds Healthy, a production of University Health System in San Antonio, Texas. Hosted and produced by me, Elizabeth Allen. Recording and audio production by Mark Greenberg. Executive producer, Lenny Kirkman.